I'm curious, just in your advice, as we're talking about kind of putting in that work, there is for our listeners who are wrestling with this calling of adoption, whether or not they're going to step into the work that we're talking about today,
Mhm.
what encouragement or insight would you offer just as they begin to prepare their hearts to go on this journey and to even consider what it's like to have this ongoing relationship with biological family, all the things maybe they haven't thought of yet related to adoption?
If it's struggling, if their struggle is in whether or not to keep that connection with the biological family, for them, I mean, obviously praying about such things is helpful and healthy, but I would just encourage them to keep the child at the center of your considerations.
Hmm.
Because if it's child centric and you really want to do what's best for your child, you'll see the beauty and the rationale behind open adoption.
Yeah.
So it might scare us a little bit as adults, but that's only our insecurities speaking. But be assured that child knows who mom is and knows who dad is. The adoptive parents can be secure in knowing that the child, feels comfortable. You're raising him. You're the one who gets up in the middle of the night when there's a temperature or whatever else is going on.
Yeah.
So, like, I can't remember ever that my daughter was confused about that.
Hmm. That's
Just
amazing.
doesn't hardly happen.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really good word. I think, we need to talk about these things because it
Hmm.
is a very vulnerable experience
Yeah.
in every aspect. And so talking about, just having those conversations, I think there is a lot of emphasis on how we approach the conversation related to our mothers who are making that decision of whether or not to parent, whether or not to choose adoption. It can be
Hmm.
very difficult for those who are just longing for a child, longing to add to our families, to not fall into conversations that might put pressure on a mother. And so what are some what's some advice that you might give us just in terms of having conversations if you've been introduced to maybe a young mother who's contemplating, maybe there's someone in your family that is contemplating that conversation? What are ways that we as the potential adoptive parents can be encouraging, uplifting, pointing them to their freedom of choice, and leaning into God's will to parent their child?
Yeah. Well, you're talking about if we're in a position to speak into the life of the woman facing the unplanned pregnancy. So if she
Right.
got surprised by a pregnancy, I think the best thing that we can do is to just take a breath and step back and look at the big picture. Help her look at the big picture. Because there's a tendency, especially in our society today, there's a tendency to want to solve problems right now. Like,
Yeah.
fix this by this weekend, or make a decision by this weekend,
Right.
and to just step back and say, so let's take some time to really understand all the options on the table and get full information, read up about who's chosen what, how do they feel a few years later, and really encourage the big picture view. Out of all of the birth moms that I've spoken to who chose adoption, when they look back on the year of choosing adoption and making their placement, making their plan and making their placement, when they look back on that with some distance, they see that typically they describe that as the most difficult year of their lives and yet the most beautiful year of their lives,
Oh, wow.
where they really would not even change a thing. Many of them. You
Right.
can't speak for everybody, but
Sure.
it's really in hindsight to know that you've actually chosen parents for your baby and then created a new family. That's almost mind blowing to wrap your mind around that. That a 17 or 18-year-old young woman has the power to create a family.
Yeah.
And uh, that's just, it's a perspective thing. So that's what
Yeah.
I would say. In answer to your question, I'd say just to look at some perspective, and which is big picture, which is taking a step back and a breath to think it through.
Mm,
And so,
that's
like, don't be tempted to solve problems in the next couple days.
yes, I think that's great. Yeah, I mean, decisions made out of reaction often do bring regret, and so I think
Hmm.
that's definitely wisdom for sure. So
Hmm.
that's become your mission. You are traveling all over the country, and you are advocating for more education because I think that
Yes.
the last statistic I read, there was something like more than 2 million families who are waiting for and hoping for successful adoption.
Uh-huh.
And then you talk about only 1% of unplanned pregnancies, going towards adoption. And so the math doesn't match there.
It does,
Obviously, in a
right,
perfect world, we want to meet that need with the other. And so lean into, like, I think you said today,
right.
you're even traveling to California as we speak. And
Yeah.
so to create more awareness in all of this, how are you educating people, and how is that being received?
Well, so just knowing those numbers is a good first step, to realize that the 1% is out of almost 3 million women a year in this country who are facing unplanned pregnancy.
Wow.
So if you said 3 million women, that would be, that would be 30,000 babies if it was 1%. But we know that there aren't even 20,000. So it's less than 1% of the 3 million who become infant adoption, placement plans. And so educating about those numbers, and so sort of seeing the magnitude of that almost 3 million unplanned pregnancies, that's quite a huge number. And then when you bring it down to our own community, one in four teenagers faces unplanned pregnancy by the time they're 20. So if one in four teenagers is getting pregnant by 20, that means it's in your neighborhood, it's in your community, it's in your church or in your school or in your family. It could be your niece or your student in class. It could be your best friend's daughter, your best friend's niece. It's all over if it's one in four students there, or one
Yeah.
in four teenagers that are getting pregnant.
Yeah.
So that's a call to action for all of us to be ready to talk about adoption.
Yes.
And it's also true that very few adults understand what open adoption is. Like we said earlier, they think it's co-parenting, or they get it confused with foster care, which is another misconception.
Right. Yes.
So if we just get educated so that we're in a position to talk to that one in four, that would be a really nice. I'd love to see the whole adult community step into that call to action.
You bet.